November 14th, 1965, 10:48 hours. The Central Highlands of Vietnam. Lieutenant Colonel Harold Gregory Moore, Jr., 43 years old from Bardstown, Kentucky, stands in the door of a UH-1D Huey helicopter. Below him stretches an ocean of elephant grass, 8 feet tall, concealing whatever waits in the valley called Ia Drang. In exactly 2 minutes, Moore will become the first battalion commander in United States Army history to deliberately land with the first wave of his assault force into a hot landing zone. This decision violates every principle taught at the Command and General Staff College. Colonels command from the rear. They coordinate. They direct. They do not lead from the front in the opening seconds of an air assault into unknown enemy strength. But Moore made a promise to the 450 men of his 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry Regiment. Every promise he makes, he keeps, and the promise was simple. He would be the first soldier to set foot in the valley and the last soldier to leave. In 16 minutes, those 450 American soldiers will face nearly 2,000 North Vietnamese Army regulars in the first major conventional battle between American and North Vietnamese forces. What happens in this valley over the next 4 days will define how the United States fights this war. It will revolutionize helicopter warfare. It will produce acts of courage that defy comprehension. It will reveal a brutal truth that politicians in Washington refuse to accept. The enemy is not some ragtag guerrilla force. They are well-trained, heavily armed, and absolutely willing to die. Moore checks his M16 rifle one final time. In his left breast pocket, folded with precise military creases, are 4 letters to the wives of men he expects to lose today. He wrote them last night in his tent, by flashlight, choosing his words with the care of a man who understands that some wounds cannot heal. The helicopter begins its descent. The road to Ia Drang. 6 months earlier, in March 1965, the 1st United States Marines waded ashore at Da Nang to cheering crowds throwing flowers. The American public was told this would be a limited engagement, advisors helping the South Vietnamese Army fight communist insurgents. President Lyndon Johnson promised no American boys would do the fighting that Asian boys should do. That promise died somewhere between Da Nang and the Central Highlands. By November 1965, General William Westmoreland, 51, commander of Military Assistance Command Vietnam, faces a strategic dilemma. North Vietnamese Army regulars are infiltrating South Vietnam in increasing numbers, using the Ho Chi Minh Trail through Laos and Cambodia. These are not Viet Cong guerrillas in black pajamas. These are professional soldiers of the People's Army of Vietnam, trained by Soviet and Chinese advisors, equipped with AK-47 assault rifles and heavy machine guns. Westmoreland's solution? Find them, fix them in place, and destroy them with superior American firepower. He calls it search and destroy. The strategy depends entirely on a revolutionary concept called air mobility, using helicopters to rapidly deploy infantry anywhere in Vietnam, bypassing the jungle trails where ambushes wait. The architect of this revolution is Major General Harry Kinnard, 52, from Dallas, Texas. In World War II, Kinnard jumped into Normandy with the 101st Airborne Division. Now he commands the 1st Cavalry Division Airmobile, the first unit in military history built entirely around helicopters. His division has 434 helicopters, more aircraft than some air forces possess. Each helicopter can carry 7 combat-loaded soldiers. Do the math. Kinnard can move an entire battalion anywhere in Vietnam in less than an hour. The theory is elegant. Reality, as always, is more complicated. On November 1st, 1965, North Vietnamese forces attack a Special Forces camp at Plai My, 100 miles south of Pleiku, in the Central Highlands. The attack fails, but intelligence suggests the enemy has massed significant forces in the area. Westmoreland orders the 1st Cavalry Division to find them. This is exactly the opportunity Kinnard has been waiting for. A chance to prove that air mobility works in combat, not just on training exercises in Georgia. He assigns a mission to Colonel Thomas Brown, commander of the 3rd Brigade. Brown selects the 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry Regiment for the assault, the 1st of the 7th. The number carries weight. This is George Armstrong Custer's regiment, the unit annihilated at Little Bighorn in 1876. Every officer and NCO in the battalion knows the history. Some consider the assignment bad luck. Moore considers it irrelevant. He does not believe in omens. He believes in training firepower and keeping promises. Lieutenant Colonel Hal Moore took command of the 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry in July 1965. He is not a typical battalion commander. Most colonels at this stage of their career have spent years behind desks, managing logistics and politics. Moore requested command of an infantry battalion headed to combat. He wanted to lead soldiers, not shuffle papers. Moore grew up during the Great Depression in Bardstown, Kentucky. His father lost everything in the stock market crash. The family survived on determination and faith, two qualities Moore inherited in abundance. He graduated from West Point in 1945, too late for World War II, but he commanded a rifle company in the Korean War. He knows what combat looks like. He knows what dead soldiers look like. And he knows that leadership in combat is measured by one metric: how many of your men make it home alive. When Moore took command of the 1st and 7th, he implemented training that bordered on obsessive, live-fire exercises with artillery landing within 50 meters of his troops. Helicopter assaults repeated until every soldier could exit a Huey and take cover in less than 3 seconds. Night movements through swamps. Hand-to-hand combat drills. Moore pushed his battalion harder than any other unit in the division, and his soldiers respected him for it, because Moore never asked them to do anything he would not do himself. He made them one promise: when we go into battle, I will be the first one to set foot on the field, and I will be the last to step off, and I will leave no one behind. Dead or alive, we all come home together. Every man in the battalion heard those words. Every man believed them. Moore's executive officer is Major Bruce Crandall, 35, from Olympia, Washington, a helicopter pilot with over 3,000 flight hours. Crandall commands Bravo Company, 229th Aviation Battalion, the 16 Hueys that will carry Moore's infantry into battle. The two men have trained together for months, perfecting the intricate choreography of air assault, timing, spacing, suppressive fire, emergency extractions. They trust each other completely, which is fortunate because in combat, trust is the only currency that matters. Moore's rifle companies are commanded by captains in their late 20s, most of them West Point graduates. Alpha Company, Captain Ramon Tony Nadal, 27, from New York City, son of Puerto Rican immigrants. Graduated West Point 1958. Aggressive, confident. Speaks fluent Spanish, which proves useless in Vietnam, but his leadership speaks the only language that matters in combat. Bravo Company, Captain John Herren, 28, from Illinois. Quiet, methodical, the kind of officer who checks every detail twice, because soldiers die from overlooked details. Charlie Company, Captain Robert Edwards, 29, from Georgia. Prior enlisted service before West Point. Knows his NCOs by name, knows their wives' names, knows which soldiers have new babies back home. This knowledge becomes unbearable later. Delta Company, Captain Louis Ray Lefebvre, 28, from Massachusetts. The most experienced company commander, having already completed one tour in Vietnam as an advisor. He knows the enemy. He respects the enemy. He does not underestimate the enemy. These four companies, roughly 450 men, represent the assault force. They're supported by a mortar platoon, a recon platoon, and a small headquarters element. Total strength: 450 souls about to enter a valley that the Montagnard tribesmen call the Place of Death. The Montagnards have occupied the Central Highlands for centuries. They know this terrain better than any map. When American intelligence officers showed them aerial photos of the Ia Drang Valley and asked if the North Vietnamese were there, the Montagnards laughed. Of course the enemy is there. The jungle always hides secrets. The question is not whether the enemy is present. The question is whether the Americans understand what they're walking into. They do not. 60 miles to the west, across the Cambodian border, Senior Colonel Nguyen Huyen, 37, commander of the People's Army of Vietnam B3 Front, studies his own maps, and is not some peasant commander leading guerrillas through rice paddies. He is a professional officer trained at military academies in China and the Soviet Union. He fought the French at Dien Bien Phu in 1954, where Vietnamese forces surrounded and destroyed an elite French paratrooper garrison. That victory expelled European colonialism from Indochina, and intends to repeat it against the Americans. His forces in the Central Highlands consist of 3 regiments. 32nd Regiment, approximately 1,600 men, veterans of campaigns against the French and South Vietnamese, armed with AK-47 rifles, RPD light machine guns, and RPG-2 rocket launchers. 33rd Regiment, approximately 1,600 men, fresh from North Vietnam, having infiltrated down the Ho Chi Minh Trail over 3 months, motivated, disciplined, trained to endure casualties that would break Western armies. 66th Regiment, approximately 2,200 men, the most experienced regiment, having fought continuously since 1959. These soldiers have survived ambushes, artillery barges, and airstrikes. They fear nothing the Americans can bring. Total enemy strength in the Central Highlands: over 5,000 men. Intelligence estimates available to Moore suggest perhaps 1,000 enemy soldiers in the area. The actual number is 5 times higher. This miscalculation will cost lives. Colonel N's strategy is elegant in its simplicity. Draw American units into the jungle, close to hand grenade range where American artillery and air power become dangerous to both sides, and overwhelm them with numbers. The Americans call this hugging tactics. On calls of survival, and knows the Americans have helicopters. He knows they have artillery. He knows they have fighter bombers that can drop napalm and high explosive. But all that firepower becomes useless if his soldiers can get close enough to grapple with American infantry in thick jungle. Courage and ideology cannot defeat high explosive, but in close combat, North Vietnamese willingness to die becomes an advantage. American mothers want their sons to come home. Vietnamese mothers have already accepted their sons will die for independence. That psychological difference matters, and chooses his battlefield carefully. The Ia Drang Valley sits at the base of the Chu Pon Massif, a mountain range that extends into Cambodia. The jungle canopy grows so thick that aerial reconnaissance cannot penetrate it. Trails crisscross the valley, invisible from above, and positions his regiments in mutually supporting positions, close enough to reinforce each other, but dispersed enough that American artillery cannot destroy them all at once. He waits. American intelligence identifies the objective as Landing Zone X-Ray, a clearing roughly the size of a football field in the Ia Drang Valley, approximately 14 miles northwest of Plamy. Aerial reconnaissance shows elephant grass and scattered trees. No visible enemy activity. The intelligence assessment concludes, LZ X-Ray appears undefended, suitable for battalion-size air assault. This assessment is catastrophically wrong. LZ X-Ray sits less than 2 miles from Colonel N's field headquarters. The clearing is not undefended. It is bait, and has positioned elements of the 33rd Regiment in the jungle surrounding the LZ with strict orders. Do not fire at the first helicopters. Let the Americans land. Let them think they are safe. Wait until at least 100 Americans are on the ground. Then attack from 3 sides simultaneously. Cut them off from reinforcement. Destroy them in detail. Show Washington that air mobility is not revolutionary. It is suicide. On the morning of November 14, 1965, Moore receives his orders from Colonel Brown. Take your battalion into LZ X-Ray. Search the area for enemy forces. Make contact. Fix them in place. We'll bring in additional battalions to destroy them. Moore studies a map in his command tent. Something bothers him about X-Ray. The clearing is too convenient, too isolated. If the enemy is present in strength, his battalion will land surrounded. But orders are orders, and Moore has trained his battalion for exactly the scenario. He gathers his company commanders at 9:30 hours for final briefing. The plan is straightforward. Phase 1, 10:30 to 11 o'clock, Bravo Company 229th Aviation, commanded by Major Crandall, will insert Alpha and Bravo companies, approximately 200 men, into LZ X-Ray. The first lift will include Moore and his command element. Total time, 30 minutes, limited by helicopter availability. Phase 2, 11 to 12 o'clock second lift, brings in Charlie Company and half of Delta Company. Phase 3, 12 to 1300 hours, remaining elements of Delta Company, mortars, and additional ammunition. Phase 4, 13:00 plus established perimeter. Send out patrols, locate enemy positions. Artillery support will be provided by 105mm howitzers positioned at Landing Zone Falcon, 12 miles southeast. Forward air controllers will coordinate fighter bomber strikes if heavy contact develops. Medevac helicopters will orbit nearby for casualties. Moore looks at his captains. They are young, confident, well-trained. They do not yet understand that plans survive until first contact, and after that, leadership becomes improvisation under fire. Gentlemen, Moore says quietly, we're going into the valley to find the enemy. I believe we'll find them. When we do, remember your training. Take care of your men. And when this is over, we all come home together. At 10:17 hours, Moore boards the lead Huey. His radio operator, Specialist 4 Robert Willett, 20, from Maine, follows him. Behind them, 450 American soldiers climb into helicopters that will carry them into a valley where 2,000 North Vietnamese soldiers wait in concealment. The Battle of Ia Drang is about to begin. The 16 Hueys of Bravo Company, 229th Aviation approach, LZ X-ray in diamond formation, for groups of 4 aircraft each. Moore's helicopter leads the first group. Below, the elephant grass ripples in rotor, wash like waves on a hostile sea. Moore scans for muzzle flashes, for movement, for any indication of what waits below. Nothing. At 10:48 hours, Moore's Huey touches down. He jumps from the skid before the helicopter fully settles, his boots hitting red clay soil that will soon be stained darker colors. He immediately moves 30 meters from the LZ, taking a knee behind a termite mound 3 feet tall. His rifle points toward the tree line 200 meters west. His eyes scan. His breathing is controlled. He counts seconds. 5 soldiers follow him off the helicopter. We'll let his radio operator, Sergeant Major Basil Plumley, 46, from West Virginia, a veteran of World War II, Korea, and now Vietnam, a man whose presence instills confidence simply because he has survived every war America has fought since 1944, and 3 others. The Huey lifts off immediately, making room for the next aircraft. The sound of rotor blades is deafening. Moore counts the seconds, 12 seconds per helicopter to land, unload 7 soldiers and depart. Multiply by 16 aircraft. First lift complete in approximately 3 minutes. Alpha Company unloads on the eastern side of the LZ. Captain Nadal's men spread into a defensive perimeter instantly, muscle memory from months of training. Bravo Company takes the western side under Captain Herren. Within 4 minutes, 120 American soldiers occupy LZ X-ray. Still no enemy contact. Moore establishes his command post at the termite mound. It offers minimal cover, but clear observation of the entire LZ. Plumley kneels beside him, calmly lighting a cigarette as if he is sitting in a cafe rather than potentially surrounded by enemy forces. "Too quiet, sir," Plumley observes. Moore nods. The jungle should be alive with sound, birds, insects, the rustle of small animals. Instead, silence. The kind of silence that means something large and dangerous is nearby, holding its breath. The second wave of helicopters approaches. Moore watches them descend. Standard procedure. No problems. Then his radio crackles. Alpha 6, this is Alpha to 1. We have movement west tree line, approximately 200 meters. Cannot identify. Over. Alpha 2-1 is Second Lieutenant Alan Devlin, 23, from California, leading Alpha Company's 2nd Platoon. Good officer. Steady. Not prone to imagination. Alpha 2-1, this is Alpha 6. Can you confirm enemy? Over. Nadal responds. 3 seconds of silence. Then, Alpha 6 confirmed enemy. Multiple individuals. They're moving toward. The transmission cuts off, replaced by the unmistakable sound of AK-47 fire. Not a few scattered shots. A wall of automatic weapons fire that sound like tearing canvas amplified 1,000 times. The Battle of Ia Drang has begun. At 11:20 hours, approximately 30 minutes after Moore's helicopter touched down, North Vietnamese forces attacked from 3 sides simultaneously, west, north, and northeast. Colonel Hal's plan is unfolding exactly as designed. The Americans have committed roughly 200 soldiers to the LZ. Reinforcements are still landing. This is the moment of maximum vulnerability. Moore immediately recognizes the danger. His battalion is split, half on the ground, half still at base camp 12 miles away waiting for helicopters. The enemy is attacking in strength, not probing, not harassing, but attacking with the clear intention of overrunning the LZ before reinforcement arrive. Broken arrow, Moore says into his radio handset. I say again, broken arrow. Broken arrow is the emergency code, meaning an American unit is in danger of being overrun. It is the highest priority call in the U.S. military arsenal. Every available aircraft, fighters, bombers, helicopters, anything that can fly and carry ordnance, will divert to support a broken arrow call. Within minutes, Air Force F-100 Super Sabres are inbound from Da Nang, 150 miles away. A-1E Sky Raiders, the propeller-driven attack aircraft left over from Korea, divert from other missions. Forward air controllers and small observation planes orbit above the battle, marking targets with white phosphorus rockets. But air support takes time. Right now, Alpha Company is fighting alone. Lieutenant Devlin's platoon makes first contact with elements of the 33rd NVA Regiment's 8th Battalion. The North Vietnamese are advancing in squad-sized elements, using terrain expertly, firing and moving with the discipline of professional soldiers. Devlin's men return fire from hasty fighting positions. shallow scrapes behind logs and rocks that offer minimal protection. Private First Class Jimmy Nakayama, 19, from Hawaii, is Devlin's radio operator. Hawaiian Japanese, for generations removed from ancestors who farmed sugarcane. Nakayama joined the Army because his father served in World War II with the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, the most decorated unit in American history. Now Nakayama crouches behind a log, holding the radio handset to Devlin's ear while firing his M16 with his other hand. Alpha 6. This is Alpha to 1. Devlin transmits between bursts of rifle fire. Heavy contact. Estimate squad size enemy. Request permission to withdraw to better positions. Over. Nadal makes a decision instantly. Alpha to 1. Approved. Bound back by squads. Maintain contact. Out. Bounding overwatch. One squad moves while another squad provides covering fire. Basic infantry tactics. Practice 1,000 times in training. In combat, basic tactics executed under fire become heroic. Devlin's platoon begins a fighting withdrawal toward the main perimeter, maintaining discipline despite casualties. Specialist 4 Russell Adams, 21, from Ohio, is hit in the leg by an AK-47 round. The bullet shatters his femur. He falls, screaming. His squad leader, Staff Sergeant Carl Palmer, 28, from Texas, immediately runs Adams under fire, throws him over his shoulder in a fireman's carry, and staggers back toward friendly lines. Palmer weighs 180 pounds. Adams weighs 160. Palmer is carrying 340 pounds through elephant grass, while North Vietnamese soldiers fire at him from 80 meters away. He makes it. Adams survives. Palmer receives no medal for this action because in the chaos of Ia Drang, thousands of acts of courage go unwitnessed, except by the men they save. By 11:45 hours, Moore has approximately 200 soldiers on the ground, organized into a rough defensive perimeter shaped like a fishhook. Alpha Company hold the eastern side. Bravo Company holds the west. The northern perimeter is thin, only a few squads, because Charlie Company has not yet landed. The North Vietnamese are probing the entire perimeter, testing for weak points. Moore recognizes the pattern immediately. This is not a guerrilla ambush. This is a coordinated regimental assault. The enemy has mortars. Moore can hear the distinctive thump of 82 millimeters mortars firing from positions west of the LZ. They have heavy machine guns. And they have numbers. Moore faces a commander's nightmare. His battalion is split and under heavy attack. He has two choices. Option 1. Consolidate what he has on the ground. Cancel further insertions. Establish a tight defensive perimeter and wait for reinforcement from other battalions. Option 2. Continue inserting companies despite the enemy fire. Commit everything he has to X-ray and trust that superior American firepower will prevail. Option 1 is safer, but cedes initiative to the enemy. Option 2 is aggressive, but risks losing helicopters and having his entire battalion destroyed in detail. Moore chooses Option 2. He radios Major Crandall. Continue insertions. Get Charlie and Delta on the ground ASAP. Crandall does not hesitate. Roger that. Inbound in 3 minutes. Flying helicopters into a hot LZ requires a special kind of courage. Pilots are non-combatants by training, but combatants by necessity. They wear no body armor. Their aircraft are thin-skinned aluminum, vulnerable to rifle fire. A single AK-47 bullet through the engine means a crash. A bullet through the transmission means the rotor blade seize, and everyone dies. Crandall brings in Charlie Company at 11:52 hours. Enemy fire intensifies. Tracer rounds. Every fifth bullet visible is a green streak, arced toward the Hueys. One helicopter takes multiple hits. The pilot, Warrant Officer 1 John Mills, 24, from Iowa, feels the aircraft shudder as rounds punch through the cockpit. His co-pilot, Warrant Officer 1 David Constant, 22, from Michigan, grunts as a bullet fragments against his armored seat, sending shrapnel into his right leg. Mills keeps flying. He lands. Charlie Company troops jump out. Mills lifts off with hydraulic fluid streaming from severed lines. He makes it back to base, landing on emergency power. The helicopter is code red, unflyable. Mills walks away from it, lights a cigarette, and tells the maintenance crew he needs another bird. He will fly 12 more missions into X-ray today. By 1300 hours, Moore has approximately 400 men on the ground, most of his battalion. The perimeter is established, roughly circular, approximately 300 meters in diameter. Artillery support from LZ Falcon is landing within 200 meters of American positions. Air Force fighters are making runs every 4 minutes, dropping 500-pound bombs and napalm on suspected enemy positions in the treeline. The sound is apocalyptic. The ground shakes with each artillery impact. The napalm ignites elephant grass, sending walls of flame 30 feet high rolling across the valley. The smell, burning kerosene, burning vegetation, burning flesh, becomes something no man ever forgets. Sergeant Plumley walks the perimeter, calm as if inspecting a training exercise. He stops at each position, checking ammunition, checking wounds, checking morale. He carries an M16 rifle but never fires it. His presence is his weapon. Soldiers see him walking upright through enemy fire and think, if the sergeant major isn't worried, I'm not worried. Captain Nadal's Alpha Company holds the eastern perimeter. At 13:15 hours, they repel a mass assault, approximately 150 North Vietnamese soldiers advancing in 3 waves. The Americans fire on full automatic. M60 machine guns cut down attackers at 70 meters. Nadal calls an artillery danger close, shells landing 60 meters from his positions. Shrapnel tears through tree branches overhead. Several Americans are wounded by friendly fire, but the assault breaks. The North Vietnamese leave 37 bodies in the elephant grass. They carry off perhaps twice that number of wounded. Colonel does not waste lives carelessly, but he is testing American resolve. He needs to know, will these soldiers break? Will they panic? Will they run? They do not run. At 14:30 hours, Moore receives a radio transmission from Colonel Brown at brigade headquarters. Battalion has taken heavy casualties. Can you hold until tomorrow morning? We'll bring in 2nd Battalion. 7th Cavalry at first light. Moore looks around his perimeter. Wounded men lie in rows near the command post, waiting for medevac. Dead men lie covered with ponchos. Ammunition is running low, but his soldiers are holding their positions. They are fighting back. They are not breaking. We'll hold, Moore transmits. At 15:05 hours, Captain Herren reports that his 2nd Platoon Bravo Company is cut off. The platoon, led by 2nd Lieutenant Henry Herrick, 24, from California, had been ordered to conduct a patrol northwest of the perimeter at 1400 hours, searching for enemy positions. Herrick took 27 men, 1 understrength platoon, into jungle so thick that visibility dropped to 30 feet. At 14:40 hours, Herrick's platoon stumbled into an NVA battalion, approximately 400 enemy soldiers, moving toward the LZ. The North Vietnamese were as surprised as the Americans. Both sides opened fire simultaneously at distances measured in yards, not football fields. In thick jungle, ambushes are mutual. Whoever fires first usually wins. Herrick's men fired first, killing perhaps 20 NVA soldiers in the first burst of fire. Then the weight of numbers told. 400 rifles firing on full automatic generate approximately 24,000 rounds per minute. You cannot survive that volume of fire. You can only take cover and pray. Herrick's platoon is driven into a tiny perimeter, perhaps 50 feet in diameter, at the base of a small hill. They are surrounded on 3 sides. They have no direct line of retreat to friendly lines, and the enemy is closing in. Herrick radios Captain Herren. Bravo 6, this is Bravo 2-1. Heavy contact. Cannot break contact. Request support. Over. Bravo 2-1, reinforcements inbound. Hold your position. Out. But sending reinforcements means weakening the main perimeter. Moore makes a calculation. He cannot abandon Herrick's platoon. The promise, no one left behind, is not negotiable. But he also cannot risk the entire battalion, trying to save 27 men surrounded in thick jungle. He compromises. He orders Captain Edwards to take 1 platoon from Charlie Company and attempt to reach Herrick's position. Edwards takes 1st Platoon, 25 men, led by 2nd Lieutenant William Franklin, 23, from Pennsylvania. Franklin's platoon moves northwest at 15:20 hours. They advance slowly, carefully, expecting ambush at every step. The jungle is silent, except for the distant sound of gunfire from Herrick's position. They cover 200 meters in 30 minutes. At 15:50 hours, they are ambushed. North Vietnamese soldiers, concealed in spider holes and behind logs, open fire from 20 meters. Private First Class Toby Braveboy, 19, from South Carolina, is hit in the chest. He falls backward, gasping. His friend, Private First Class Junior Reese, 20, from Alabama, drags him into cover behind a fallen log. Braveboy is bleeding from a sucking chest wound. Resupplies a field dressing, but both men know it is not enough. "Tell my mama," brave boy whispers, "I wasn't scared." He dies 90 seconds later. Reese cradles his body, tears mixing with sweat and blood, until Sergeant Palmer physically pulls him away and tells him they need to keep moving. Franklin's platoon is pinned down. They cannot advance. They cannot retreat. They are 150 meters short of Herrick's position, close enough to hear the battle, too far to help. Between 1600 hours and 1800 hours, the North Vietnamese launch for major assaults against the American perimeter. Each assault involves 150 to 300 soldiers, advancing in squad rushes, using covering fire and grenades. Each assault is repelled by a combination of rifle fire, machine gun fire, artillery, and air strikes. The killing is industrial. Bodies accumulate in front of American positions like driftwood after a flood. Medical personnel stop counting enemy dead after the number exceeds 200. Many NVA soldiers die within arm's reach of American foxholes, shot in the act of throwing grenades or charging with bayonets fixed. Staff Sergeant Clyde Savage, 32, from Louisiana, command a machine gun position on the western perimeter. His M60 machine gun fires 550 rounds per minute. Between 1600 hours and 1800 hours, Savage fires approximately 8,000 rounds, 16 belted ammunition. The barrel glows red hot. Savage has to change it twice, burning his hands on the metal despite wearing gloves. His assistant gunner, Specialist 4 Charles Lewis, 21, from Ohio, feeds belts with mechanical precision while tracers streak past their heads. At one point, an NVA soldier rises from the grass 20 meters away and fires an RPG rocket at Savage's position. The rocket streaks past, missing by inches, and explodes 40 meters behind them. Savage pivots the M60 and fires a 30-round burst. The NVA soldier disappears, literally torn apart by the high-velocity rounds. Savage does not celebrate. He simply traverses left and continues firing at the next target. This is his third war. He knows celebration is premature until you count your own dead. At 1830 hours, the sun sets. Tropical darkness arrives suddenly in the Central Highlands. No gentle twilight, just day switching to night like someone flipping a switch. Moore orders all units to cease fire unless directly attacked. Ammunition conservation is critical. Resupply helicopters cannot land in darkness under fire. The night brings new horrors. The wounded cry out. Some call for medics. Others call for their mothers. The dead lie where they fell, growing cold. No one has time for graves or ceremonies. Body bags are still in base camp, 12 miles away, waiting for helicopters that cannot fly until dawn. Moore moves through the perimeter in darkness, guided only by memory and occasional flares fired by the mortar platoon. He stops at each company position, talking quietly with captains, sergeants, privates. He asks about ammunition. He asks about casualties. He asks how they're holding up. The answers vary. Some men are calm, joking darkly about the enemy's poor marksmanship. Others shake uncontrollably, not from fear but from adrenaline exhaustion after 8 hours of sustained combat. A few stare at nothing, their minds gone somewhere unreachable, already showing first signs of what will later be called PTSD. Out in the darkness, beyond the perimeter, Lieutenant Herrick's platoon still fights. They are now down to 18 men. 9 are dead. Herrick himself is badly wounded, hit in the back by rifle fire. Sergeant First Class Lorenzo Nathan, 26, from Louisiana, has taken command. Nathan radios more directly at 1945 hours. Dakota 6, this is Bravo to 1. We have multiple wounded. Low on ammunition. Cannot hold past midnight. Request immediate extraction. Over. Moore closes his eyes. Extraction is impossible. Helicopters cannot land in darkness in a hot LZ. Even if they could, reaching Herrick's position requires crossing 300 meters of jungle controlled by enemy forces. Bravo to 1. Understand your situation. Cannot extract tonight. Air support and artillery will fire around your position. Hold until first light. Reinforcements at dawn. Over. There's a long pause. Moore can hear gunfire through the radio handset. Then Nathan responds, his voice calm despite the circumstances. Roger, Dakota 6. We'll be here. Out. Moore keeps his promise about leaving no one behind. But sometimes promises take time to keep, and time measured in hours can feel like eternity when you're surrounded in darkness, listening to enemy soldiers crawling toward you through elephant grass. At 1830 hours, the sun sets. Tropical darkness arrives suddenly in the Central Highlands. No gentle twilight. Just a switching to night, like someone flipping a switch. Moore orders all units to cease fire unless directly attacked. Ammunition conservation is critical. Resupply helicopters cannot land in darkness under fire. The night brings new horrors. The wounded cry out. Some call for medics. Others call for their mothers. The dead lie where they fell, growing cold. No one has time for graves or ceremonies. Body bags are still in base camp, 12 miles away, waiting for helicopters that cannot fly until dawn. Moore moves through the perimeter in darkness, guided only by memory and occasional flares fired by the mortar platoon. He stops at each company position, talking quietly with captains, sergeants, privates. He asks about ammunition. He asks about casualties. He asks how they're holding up. The answers vary. Some men are calm, joking darkly about the enemy's poor marksmanship. Others shake uncontrollably, not from fear but from adrenaline exhaustion after 8 hours of sustained combat. A few stare at nothing, their minds gone somewhere unreachable, already showing the first signs of what will later be called PTSD. Out in the darkness, beyond the perimeter, Lieutenant Herrick's platoon still fights. They are now down to 18 men. 9 are dead. Herrick himself is badly wounded, hit in the back by rifle fire. Sergeant First Class Lorenzo Nathan, 26, from Louisiana, has taken command. Nathan radios more directly at 1945 hours. Dakota 6, this is Bravo 2-1. We have multiple wounded. Low on ammunition. Cannot hold past midnight. Request immediate extraction. Over. Moore closes his eyes. Extraction is impossible. Helicopters cannot land in darkness in a hot LZ. Even if they could, reaching Herrick's position requires crossing 300 meters of jungle control by enemy forces. Bravo 2-1. Understand your situation. Cannot extract tonight. Air support and artillery will fire around your position. Hold until first light. Reinforcements at dawn. Over. There's a long pause. Moore can hear gunfire through the radio handset. Then Nathan responds, his voice calm despite the circumstances. Roger, Dakota 6. We'll be here. Out. Moore keeps his promise about leaving no one behind. But sometimes promises take time to keep, and time measured in hours can feel like eternity when you're surrounded in darkness, listening to enemy soldiers crawling toward you through elephant grass. Through the night, American artillery fires continuously around Herrick's position, creating a ring of steel and high explosive that North Vietnamese forces cannot penetrate without suffering catastrophic casualties. Colonel Hal recognizes the situation. The isolated platoon is bait. The Americans are defending it with firepower, trying to draw his forces into killing zones, and makes the ruthless calculation. He pulls back. The platoon is not worth the cost. His objective is not to kill 20 Americans. His objective is to demonstrate that American air mobility can be defeated, that helicopter-borne infantry can be surrounded and destroyed. He has already proven his point. The 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry, has suffered over 100 casualties in 8 hours. Politically, this is victory. But it makes one mistake. He underestimates Moore's determination to retrieve Herrick's platoon. And he underestimates the courage of helicopter pilots who will fly anywhere, anytime, if American soldiers need them. At 2300 hours, Moore gathers his company commanders for a midnight conference at his command post. They huddle in darkness, speaking in whispers, planning tomorrow's operation. At first light, Moore says, "We reach Herrick. Charlie Company will lead the assault. Bravo Company will support. Alpha and Delta hold the perimeter." Questions. Captain Edwards, Charlie Company commander, asks the obvious question. "Sir, intelligence estimates enemy strength at over 1,000 in the immediate area. We're moving into that with one company." Moore nods. "We're going to bring every piece of artillery in range. We're going to bring every fighter-bomber in Vietnam. We're going to destroy everything in that tree line. And then we're going to walk through it and bring our men home." No one argues. The mission is clear. The risk is enormous. But the promise is absolute. No one gets left behind. First light breaks at 6:15 hours. Moore has not slept. Neither have most of his men. You cannot sleep when enemy soldiers probe your perimeter every hour, when the wounded groan through the night, when every snap of a twig might be an NVA sapper crawling toward your position with a satchel charge. At 6:30 hours, Moore orders the preparatory fires. Artillery from LZ Falcon opens fire. 12 105mm howitzers firing for effect. The shells scream overhead and impact in the jungle northwest of perimeter, exactly where intelligence believes the bulk of enemy forces are concentrated. Each howitzer fires 3 rounds per minute. For 15 minutes, 540 rounds of high explosive and white phosphorus tear apart the jungle. Simultaneously, Air Force F-100 Super Sabres make low-level runs, dropping napalm and 500-pound bombs. The napalm ignites with sound like a dragon's breath, a rolling whoosh followed by towering flames that consume oxygen and flesh indiscriminately. The 500-pound bombs create craters 12 feet deep. Trees 2 feet in diameter are simply erased. Captain Edwards watches the bombardment from his position. He has seen artillery before, but this is different. This is the full weight of American military power concentrated on a piece of real estate smaller than a city block. He thinks nothing can survive this. He is wrong. At 6:45 hours, the fires lift. Smoke and dust drift across the battlefield like fog. Moore gives the order. Charlie Company, move out. Edwards leads his company northwest, advancing in squad wedge formations with 5-meter intervals between soldiers. They move slowly, expecting contact at every step. The jungle is torn apart. Trees shattered, ground cratered, vegetation burned to ash. The smell is nauseating. High explosive, burning chemicals, and underneath it all, the sweet rotten smell of bodies. They advance 100 meters. No contact. 200 meters. Still nothing. At 250 meters, they find the first NVA positions. Bunkers made from logs and earth, expertly camouflaged. Empty. The enemy has withdrawn. Edwards feels a mixture of relief and unease. Where did they go? At 7:20 hours, Charlie Company reaches Herrick's position. The scene stops Edwards cold. 18 American soldiers, filthy, exhausted, wounded, are still alive. 9 bodies lie covered with ponchos. Lieutenant Herrick is barely conscious, his back wound seeping blood through field dressings. But they are there. They held through the night. They did not break. Sergeant Nathan stands when he sees Edwards approaching. His uniform is torn, his face is black with powder residue. But he salutes. Charlie 6, Bravo 2-1. We held the position. All accounted for. Edwards returns the salute. Later, he will say this moment. Seeing Nathan standing, exhausted but unbroken, was the most emotional experience of his military career. Right now, he simply nods and says, "Outstanding, Sergeant. Let's get you home." The evacuation takes 90 minutes. Medevac helicopters land under sporadic sniper fire to extract the wounded. The dead are carried to the LZ on makeshift stretchers, ponchos tied between rifles. Every body is identified, tagged, and flown out. Moore keeps his promise. No one is left behind. By 10 o'clock hours on November 15th, the immediate crisis has passed. The battalion has held X-ray against overwhelming enemy forces. Casualties are severe, 79 wounded, 15 dead, but the unit is intact and combat effective. Moore receives reinforcements. 2nd Battalion, 7th Cavalry lands at X-ray at 10:30 hours, bringing fresh troops and badly needed ammunition. Colonel Brown, the brigade commander, lands at 11 o'clock hours to personally assess the situation. Brown finds Moore at his command post, coordinating defensive positions. Moore has not shaved in 2 days. His uniform is soaked with sweat and streaked with red clay, but his eyes are clear. He briefs Brown with precise military efficiency, enemy strength, casualty figures, ammunition status, perimeter security. Brown listens and asks the crucial question, "Can you continue operations?" Moore does not hesitate. "Yes, sir. We found them. Now let's destroy them." This response encapsulates Moore's mindset. Lesser commanders might consolidate, calling the mission a success after surviving a major engagement. Moore sees unfinished business. The enemy is still out there. His battalion is bloodied but functional. The mission continues. Brown approves expanded operations. The plan: 1st Battalion and 2nd Battalion will conduct coordinated sweeps of the Ia Drang Valley, searching for the remaining NVA forces. This is exactly what General Westmoreland wants. Find the enemy, fix them in place, destroy them with firepower. For the next 3 days, Moore's battalion conduct aggressive patrolling operations around X-ray. They find evidence of the battle everywhere. Blood trails, abandoned equipment, hastily dug graves. They count 634 confirmed enemy dead in the immediate area. Intelligence estimates actual casualties at over 1,000, including wounded evacuated across the Cambodian border. The mathematics of warfare are brutal. Moore's battalion, 450 men, held off at least 2,000 enemy soldiers for 4 days. The casualty exchange ratio favors the Americans by approximately 10 to 1. By conventional military standards, this is a decisive victory. But victories in Vietnam are measured differently. The American public sees casualty figures on television. They see flag-draped coffins. They ask a fundamental question: why are we fighting for remote jungle valleys that mean nothing to American security? Moore cannot answer that question. He is a soldier, not a politician. His job is to complete his mission and bring his men home alive. He has done both, barely. On November 17th, Moore receives new orders. March a battalion to landing zone Albany, approximately 5 miles northeast of X-Ray. The 2nd Battalion, 7th Cavalry, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Robert McDade, will conduct a parallel march. Both battalions will be extracted from Albany by helicopter and redeployed to base camp. This is routine, a tactical movement to an extraction point. Moore has conducted dozens of such movements in training. The route follows an old French colonial trail through relatively open jungle. Intelligence reports no significant enemy activity along the route. Intelligence is wrong. Again, at 6:30 hours on November 17th, Moore's battalion begins the march. They move in standard patrol formation, lead platoon main body, rear security. Spacing is 5 meters between soldiers to prevent a single ambush from devastating the entire column. Progress is slow, approximately 1 kilometer per hour in thick jungle. By 1300 hours, the battalion reaches Albany. The clearing is smaller than X-Ray, barely large enough for helicopters to land. Moore establishes a perimeter and radios Colonel Brown. Dakota 6 at Albany, ready for extraction. Over. Behind Moore, the 2nd Battalion, 7th Cavalry is still en route. They are strung out along the trail, tired from the march, not particularly alert. 4 days of sustained combat have dulled their edge. They think the battle is over. They think they're going home. Colonel Hal thinks differently. He has been tracking both American battalions since they left X-Ray. His forces have suffered heavy casualties, but 3 regiments are still combat capable. And the Americans have just made a fatal mistake. They're spread out along a narrow trail in column formation, the most vulnerable posture in jungle warfare. At 13:15 hours, elements of the 8th Battalion, 66th NVA Regiment attacked the 2nd Battalion, 7th Cavalry along a 500-meter stretch of trail. The ambush is perfectly executed. Simultaneous fire from both sides of the trail, catching the Americans in a crossfire with no cover. The lead companies are hit first, then the middle, then the rear, cutting the battalion into isolated groups. Moore hears the gunfire from Albany. It sounds different from the firefights at X-Ray, more chaotic, less organized. He immediately recognizes what is happening. Ambush, large scale, catastrophic. He radios McDade. Raider 6, this is Dakota 6. Under fire? Can you break contact? Over. The response is garbled, broken by static and the sound of explosions. Then Dakota 6 heavy casualties, unable to need support, out. Moore makes an immediate decision. He orders Alpha Company to march back along the trail toward the ambush site, 5 kilometers away. This is a calculated risk. He is sending 1 company to reinforce a battalion-sized element under fire. But Alpha Company is his most experienced unit, commanded by Captain Nadal, and waiting for orders from higher headquarters might mean the 2nd Battalion is destroyed. Alpha Company moves out at 13:30 hours. They advance at double time, 3 kilometers per hour, expecting to hit enemy forces at any moment. The sound of gunfire grows louder as they approach. What happens to the 2nd Battalion? 7th Cavalry at Albany becomes the worst single day in American military history since the Korean War. Over the next 4 hours, approximately 155 American soldiers are killed and 124 wounded, a casualty rate of nearly 60%. Entire platoons are wiped out. Company commanders die trying to rally their men. Sergeants die covering retreats. Privates die where they stand because there is nowhere to run. The North Vietnamese employ hugging tactics with devastating effect. They close to within grenade range, making American artillery and air support unusable without killing friendly forces. They target officers and radio operators first, decapitating command structure. They attack from all directions simultaneously, creating chaos that prevents organized defense. Captain Nadal's Alpha Company arrives at the edge of the kill zone at 14:45 hours. What they find is carnage. Bodies lie scattered along the trail. Wounded soldiers crawl toward friendly lines. Small groups of survivors fight from behind trees and termite mounds, surrounded on all sides. Nadal makes a command decision that saves lives. Instead of plunging into the chaos, he establishes a defensive position at the edge of the kill zone and begins pulling survivors to safety. His men provide covering fire while small teams, 2 or 3 soldiers, dash forward, grab wounded Americans, and drag them back to perimeter. Sergeant Palmer, who carried the wounded soldier at X-ray, volunteers for 3 separate rescue missions. Each time, he runs through enemy fire, grabs a wounded man, and carries him to safety. On his 3rd run, he is hit in the shoulder by an AK-47 round. The bullet breaks his collarbone. He completes the rescue anyway, depositing the wounded soldier behind cover before allowing medics to treat his wound. By 1800 hours, darkness is falling and the battlefield becomes even more chaotic. North Vietnamese soldiers move through American positions, shooting wounded, stripping bodies of weapons and equipment. Some Americans play dead, lie among corpses for hours, waiting for rescue. Others fight until their ammunition runs out, then fight with knives and entrenching tools. Specialist 4 Jack Smith, 21, from California, a radio operator with Charlie Company, survives by hiding under the bodies of 2 dead soldiers. For 3 hours, he lies motionless while NVA soldiers walk past within feet of his position. He can hear them talking, hear them dragging American weapons away. He does not move. He barely breathes. At 20-30 hours, Smith hears American voices. He risks calling out, "Friendlies, don't shoot." It is Alpha Company. They have been searching the battlefield for survivors since nightfall, using red lens flashlights to avoid attracting enemy fire. They pull Smith from under the bodies. He is covered in blood, none of it his own, and in shock. They wrap him in a poncho and carry him to the perimeter. Smith survives. 71 of his fellow soldiers from Charlie Company do not. By dawn on November 18th, the full scope of the Albany ambush becomes clear. The 2nd Battalion, 7 Cavalry, has been effectively destroyed as a fighting unit. Casualties exceed 60%. Survivors are evacuated to base camp, many suffering from wounds and psychological trauma. The battalion will be reconstituted with replacement soldiers, but it will take months to rebuild combat effectiveness. Moore's 1st Battalion, in contrast, remains combat capable despite 4 days of fighting. Total casualties, 79 killed, 121 wounded. Roughly 40% casualty rate, severe but survivable. The difference is leadership, training, and luck. Moore's aggressive defense at X-ray prevented encirclement. His insistence on maintaining tight perimeter control saved lives. His promise to leave no one behind gave his soldiers confidence to hold positions even when surrounded. The Albany ambush produces a different outcome because the battalion was caught in column formation during movement, the most vulnerable tactical posture. No amount of training or leadership can overcome a perfectly executed ambush against a strung-out column. On November 19th, Moore's battalion is extracted from Albany by helicopter. As the Hueys lift off, Moore looks down at the valley where his battalion fought for 4 days. The jungle shows scars, bomb craters, burned areas, shell holes. But within weeks, the vegetation will grow back. Within months, no physical evidence will remain, except perhaps scattered shell casings and rusted equipment. Moore boards the last helicopter, keeping his promise. He is the last man to leave the battlefield. The 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry, returns to base camp at Inqui on November 20th, 1965. They arrive as different men than those who boarded helicopters 4 days earlier. They have seen things that cannot be unseen, done things that cannot be undone. Some will carry these memories for the rest of their lives. Others will suppress them until the memories surface decades later, triggered by sounds or smells or nightmares. Moore gathers his battalion in a clearing at Inqui. 450 men started the mission. 79 will not attend this formation. They are dead, their bodies already processed through the military mortuary system, embalmed, placed in flag-draped coffins, and shipped home to families who received telegram notifications 2 days earlier. Moore does not make a speech. He simply says, "You held, you fought, you did your duty. I'm proud to serve with you." The men stand in formation, silent. Some cry openly. Others stare at the ground. A few manage weak smiles, grateful to be alive. All of them understand that something fundamental has changed. They are no longer the confident, well-trained battalion that arrived in Vietnam 3 months ago. They are combat veterans, survivors of the first major battle between American and North Vietnamese forces. They have learned that courage does not prevent death, that training does not guarantee survival, that war is not glorious. It is simply endurance punctuated by terror. Over the following weeks, The battalion receives replacement soldiers to fill the gaps left by casualties. These replacements are called F&Gs, fucking new guys, and they are treated with a mixture of pity and contempt by the veterans. The replacements have not yet been tested. They do not yet understand what combat means. The veterans know that some percentage of these F&Gs will die in their first firefight, and there is no way to predict who will survive and who will not. Captain Nadal is promoted to major and assigned to brigade staff. Captain Herren returns home for medical treatment. He was wounded twice at X-ray, though he refused evacuation until the battle ended. Captain Edwards continues commanding Charlie Company until his tour ends in March 1966. Sergeant Plumley serves another year in Vietnam, then retires as a command sergeant major. He will live to age 92, attending reunions and speaking at military academies about leadership under fire. Lieutenant Herrick, the platoon leader who was surrounded, survives his wounds but is paralyzed from the waist down. He is medically retired and spends the rest of his life in a wheelchair. He never complains. He tells interviewers, "My men held. We did our job. That's all that matters." In Washington, D.C., military and political leaders analyze the Battle of Ia Drang through different lenses. General Westmoreland declares the battle a decisive victory. His report to President Johnson emphasizes a favorable casualty exchange ratio, approximately 10-1 in favor of American forces. He argues that air mobility works, that American firepower can defeat North Vietnamese forces, and that the strategy of search and destroy is validated. Westmoreland concludes, "If we can achieve this casualty ratio consistently, the enemy cannot sustain the war. We will win through attrition." This assessment contains a fatal flaw. It assumes the enemy will fight American-style conventional battles where superior firepower determines outcomes. In reality, the North Vietnamese learned from Ia Drang. They learned to avoid open battles. They learned to attack and withdraw before American artillery can respond. They learned to hug American positions, closing the distances where supporting fires become dangerous to both sides. Colonel Hal writes his own after-action report. He acknowledges heavy casualties, but claims a strategic victory. His reasoning: the Americans committed significant forces to hold a remote valley with no strategic value. They fought for 4 days, suffered casualties, and then withdrew, leaving the valley to North Vietnamese control. Within 1 week of the American departure, NVA forces reoccupied the area. Nothing has changed except the body count. And concludes, the Americans have helicopters and firepower, but they do not have the will to accept casualties indefinitely. Every American mother whose son dies in Vietnam becomes our ally. Time is on our side. This assessment proves more accurate than Westmoreland's. The Vietnam War will not be decided by casualty ratios or firepower. It will be decided by political will and the American public's willingness to accept casualties for unclear objectives. The Battle of Ia Drang received significant media attention in the United States. Journalists embedded with American units report on the fighting in real time. Photographs of wounded soldiers being evacuated by helicopter appear on the front pages of major newspapers. Television news broadcasts show footage of air strikes and artillery barges. The coverage creates competing narratives. Military narrative: American forces successfully defended against overwhelming enemy numbers. Superior training and firepower prevailed. Air mobility proves effective. Anti-war narrative: American casualties in a remote jungle valley raise questions about why American soldiers are dying for unclear objectives. If this is victory, what does defeat look like? The American public begins to divide along these narrative lines. Supporters of the war point to Ia Drang as evidence that American military power can defeat communist forces. Opponents point to the casualty figures and ask why American soldiers are dying in places most Americans cannot find on a map. This debate will intensify over the next decade, eventually forcing President Johnson to decline running for re-election in 1968 and leading President Nixon to negotiate American withdrawal in 1973. The Battle of Ia Drang revolutionizes helicopter warfare. Before Ia Drang, air mobility was a theory. After Ia Drang, it becomes standard doctrine. The U.S. Army expands helicopter production, creates additional air cavalry units, and trains thousands of pilots specifically for combat insertion missions. The UH-1 Huey becomes the iconic aircraft of the Vietnam War. Over 7,000 Hueys will eventually serve in Vietnam, flying millions of missions, transporting soldiers, supplies, and wounded. The distinctive wop-wop-wop sound of Huey rotor blades becomes permanently associated with the war. But helicopters also create vulnerabilities. They are expensive, require extensive maintenance, and are vulnerable to ground fire. Between 1965 and 1973, the U.S. military loses over 5,000 helicopters in Vietnam, shot down, crashed, or destroyed on the ground. Each helicopter cost approximately $250,000 in 1965 dollars, roughly $2.4 million in 2024 dollars. The financial cost of air mobility is enormous. Tactically, the lesson of Ia Drang is clear. Air mobility works if you control the landing zone. If the enemy ambushes helicopters during landing, casualties can be catastrophic. The Albany ambush demonstrates this. Future operations emphasize reconnaissance, preparatory fires, and landing zone security. The soldiers who fought at Ia Drang carry the battle with them for the rest of their lives. Some successfully reintegrate into civilian life. Others struggle with PTSD, alcoholism, failed relationships, and the inability to explain to people who are not there what combat actually means. Specialist Jack Smith, who survived the Albany ambush by hiding under dead bodies, returns to California after his tour ends. He tries college but cannot focus. He tries work but cannot hold jobs. The nightmares persist, vivid, recurring dreams where he is back in the jungle, surrounded, unable to move. He eventually seeks treatment at a VA hospital and is diagnosed with severe PTSD. Therapy helps, but the memories never fully fade. Sergeant Palmer, who carried wounded soldiers at X-ray, serves a full 20-year career in the Army, retiring as a sergeant major. He speaks at leadership courses about decision-making under fire. He tells students, leadership in combat is simple. Take care of your soldiers. Lead from the front. Never ask them to do something you won't do yourself. If you follow those principles, they'll follow you anywhere. Palmer never discusses the specific details of what he did at X-ray. He considers his actions unremarkable, what any soldier would do for a comrade. His Silver Star citation, awarded for repeatedly entering enemy fire to rescue wounded men, hangs on a wall in his home. He rarely looks at it. Lieutenant Colonel Hal Moore continues his Army career, eventually retiring as a lieutenant general in 1977. He remains in contact with veterans of the 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry, attending reunions and staying involved in veterans organizations. In 1992, he co-authors a book with journalist Joseph Galloway titled, We Were Soldiers Once and Young. The book becomes a bestseller and is adapted into a 2002 film starring Mel Gibson. Moore's central message in the book and subsequent interviews is simple. Leadership matters. Training matters. Promises matter. The soldiers at X-ray held not because of superior equipment or firepower, but because they trusted their leaders and each other. That trust was earned through months of preparation and validated in 4 days of sustained combat. Moore lives to age 94, passing away in 2017. His funeral at Fort Benning, Georgia, is attended by hundreds of veterans from the 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry. They come from across the United States. Old men now, in their 70s and 80s, some using wheelchairs or canes. They come to honor the promise Moore kept, that they would all come home together. And they did, though some came home in coffins, and others came home carrying wounds visible and invisible. Colonel Nguyen Huyen survives the war and continues serving in the Vietnamese People's Army. In the 1990s, after Vietnam normalizes relations with the United States and meets with American veterans, including Hal Moore, these meetings are emotional, surreal, and ultimately healing for some participants. And tells Moore, we respected you as soldiers. You fought bravely, but you were fighting for the wrong cause. Vietnam belongs to Vietnamese people, not to foreigners, whether French or American. Moore responds, we were soldiers following orders. We did our duty as we understood it. I respect your courage, even though we were enemies. This exchange encapsulates the complexity of the Vietnam War. Individual soldiers on both sides demonstrated courage, sacrifice, and devotion to duty. But courage in service of flawed strategy produces tragedy, not victory. And writes his own memoir, published in Vietnam, describing the Battle of Ia Drang from a North Vietnamese perspective. He acknowledges heavy casualties, but argues the battle achieved strategic objectives. It demonstrated that American forces could be defeated, that Vietnamese forces could stand against superior firepower, and that the war would not end quickly regardless of American military advantages. And passes away in 2010, receiving full military honors from the Vietnamese government. His obituary describes him as a hero of the resistance against American imperialism. American veterans who met him remember him differently, as a professional soldier who fought for his country's independence with the same dedication they brought to their mission. In 2004, the U.S. Army dedicates a memorial at Fort Benning, Georgia, honoring the soldiers of the 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry who fought at Ia Drang. The memorial consists of a granite wall, engraved with the names of 79 American soldiers killed in action, along with a bronze statue of a soldier carrying a wounded comrade. The dedication ceremony is attended by several hundred veterans, many accompanied by their families. Some bring children and grandchildren, wanting younger generations to understand what their fathers and grandfathers experienced. Others come alone, seeking closure that may never fully arrive. Hal Moore speaks at the ceremony. He is 82 years old, his voice strong despite his age. He says, "We gather here to honor these 79 young men who gave their lives in a valley in Vietnam that most Americans have never heard of, fighting for a cause that many Americans questioned. But these men did not die for politics. They died for each other. They died doing their duty. They died believing that their sacrifice mattered. And it did matter. It mattered to their families. It mattered to their fellow soldiers. And it matters to every soldier who serves today, knowing that someone will come for them, that they will not be left behind, that the promise will be kept." The crowd stands in silence. Some cry. Others salute. All remember. Today, the Ia Drang Valley is farmland. Vietnamese farmers cultivate rice paddies where American and North Vietnamese soldiers once fought. Occasionally, farmers unearth unexploded ordnance, artillery shells, mortar rounds, grenades, rusted but still dangerous. Vietnamese government teams carefully remove and destroy these remnants of war. No monuments mark the battlefield. The Vietnamese government has not preserved the site as a memorial park or tourist destination. The valley is simply part of Vietnam, returned to peaceful agricultural use, the violence that occurred there decades ago slowly fading from living memory. American veterans who returned to Vietnam to visit the battlefield report mixed emotions. The jungle has reclaimed the tree lanes where they fought. The landing zones are now fields. The trails where men died are overgrown. Nothing physical remains to mark what happened, except perhaps the occasional shell fragment or piece of equipment uncovered by erosion. But the memories remain. Veterans in their 70s and 80s still wake from nightmares about Ia Drang. They still remember friends who died there, remember their faces, remember their last words. They remember the heat, the fear, the exhaustion, and the strange combination of terror and exhilaration that defines combat. They remember Hal Moore's promise that they would come home together, dead or alive. And they did. Every American soldier who fell at Ia Drang was recovered, identified, and returned to their families for burial. No one was left behind. The promise was kept. This is a true legacy of the Battle of Ia Drang. Not the casualty figures, not the tactical lessons, not the political debates, but the simple fact that soldiers kept their promises to each other in a war that would eventually be defined by broken promises. Promises about quick victory, about light casualties, about clear objectives. The soldiers at X-Ray kept the one promise that mattered most. They took care of each other. They fought for each other. They died for each other. And when it was over, they brought each other home. 59 years later, that promise still resonates. It reminds us that war is not about politics or strategy. War is about young men and women sent into danger, doing their duty, looking after each other, trying to survive. The soldiers at Ia Drang did not choose the war. They did not choose the battlefield. They did not choose the enemy. But they chose to keep their promises. And that choice, repeated thousands of times in 4 days of fighting, made all the difference.